Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. Bradley's mother, Narkis Golan, passed away 3 months ago. He is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to the Italian Social Services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak or understand the language. He will be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 and voice your concerns to keep Bradley here in these United States. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I welcome back Laurie Smith. She was last on the podcast, season 3, episode 170, and that was December 5th. And I'm so glad to have you back because we're changing gears for 2023 and we need some advice, even
I
myself.
I'm so excited. Thanks for having me back, Marianne. And yeah, so I'm in my office for those that can see or not. In the back, it says anything is possible.
Mhm,
And on the I don't know what side on yours, but it says grateful.
mhm.
And those are not frivolous, positive psychology things for me. They're something, they are mantras that ground me in remember. I'm a therapist, LMSW, so I deal with a lot of trauma, a lot of harm reduction, but we all need sort of guideposts to improve our experience of enduring
Mhm.
really shitty things.
Oh, yes,
Not
yes.
that we should have to endure really shitty things, but the first, so speaking of switching gears, one of the things that is really, 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 really like one of the most important things and most difficult things to digest when we're going through something horrific is first we have to wrestle with our belief that um, it isn't fair.
Mhm.
And that's 100% accurate. It is not fair. Our illusion is that it was ever set up to be fair. Because we often talk about the world in terms of like, oh, good people will get ahead, and you only endure bad things if you're a bad person. And that's quite simply, in my 20 years of experience and 46 years on this earth, not the case. Life is not fair. It was never meant to be fair. It cannot be fair precisely because it's out there. And I'm pointing out there. If you look throughout history, bad things have always happened, right? Crusades, we smash a bug and their life ends. I mean, it's not, that is not where the safety is my point.
Mhm.
So in my work, I work with people on buffering and in improving the internal capacity, resilience, resourcing, so that those bad things that happen in life, yes, they are bad, but make no mistake, the world cannot, the world can seem to make your life very crappy. But let me give you an example of that.
Mhm.
Okay, so Viktor Frankl, I've yet to read his book, but I refer to him all the time because of all of what I understand about him thus far. Viktor Frankl was in the Holocaust. He was in the Holocaust in the worst of times. He wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he describes all of these quotes that he figured out how himself to get through that experience. I wouldn't wish the Holocaust on anybody. I wouldn't wish trauma on anybody. The fact remains that it happens without our permission quite often, but we have agency in how we relate and react and respond to these things. That is the power. And I don't want to minimize the effect of the outside world, but I often in my work spend a lot of time enhancing and reminding us that we actually do have some internal resources and we've been using them all along. So don't discount yourself in a really shitty situation. Okay, does that make sense? Because I kind of got a little bit
No, it really
okay.
does because, I hear people say, you know, I'm sick of hearing things happen for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what to say to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't matter what I think. I personally can see the greater thread in why and how things happen, but that's me. That I've done my work. I don't have to make sense. And I couldn't, when I've had bad things in my own life, there's no way I could have made sense with them. In fact, there was one point I was suicidal because the world that I thought I was living in just got smashed open by these incredibly invasive, non-permission traumas that kept happening to me. And again, part of that identity shift is the awareness that, like, this shouldn't be happening to me. I am a quote unquote good person. Why
Mhm.
are you harming me? Well, it is important to ask why, but it's more important to make sure that you don't get lost in the storyline that the trauma is trying to place you in. What I mean by that is listening to the courts and hearing them say, or believing them when they make a case that you're a quote unquote bad mother. Hold the phone, hold the phone. That's their evidence. That's what they understand. What do you understand about yourself? We better check in with what I think about myself, because if I'm thinking what the perpetrator is thinking about me, then I am doing some of the oppression for my perpetrator.
Mhm.
And this isn't a defense. This is a very honest, like, let's come to Jesus. Where's my evidence that I'm a bad mother? Have I ever, could I have done some bad things? And then that we get into self-compassion and forgiveness and all that. And I don't want to make it sort of a spiritual topic today. I just am globally, switching gears is about going within. It's not about changing anything outside in the outside world, because that is not within our control to change. We change it, oddly enough, through like a internal, like, cleansing, clearing, revamping. I call it buffering. We change the outside world from the inside out.
Mhm.
If I am talking to my daughter about a court case that I'm in, and I am, really mean and upset about it, she's going to get the idea that it's a really horrible thing, whatever. And that may be the case. But I can also spend time with my daughter and re-mind myself
Mhm.
of all of the good ways that I am a mother, and how I know that's not true, and what makes me believe it's not true, and where can I put my um coins, so to speak.
Mhm.
Like, I talk a lot about looking at your evidence in my sessions. Like, let's look at the evidence out
Mhm.
of out of the day. Do an experiment and add up the days that you've been a parent, literally. Let's say you've got 12,585 days.
Mhm.
Then go back and make it count how many days that you've done something you think is wrong being a parent. All of them, all of the highlights that come, the highlight reel of how bad I am. And then I want you to do that percentage of how many days I didn't do what I thought I needed to do to be a good parent versus the percentage of days I've actually been a parent. What is the percentage? Because my hunch, I know this because I do it with clients all the time in different ways. It's a really high percentage that you've been hitting the mark to the best of your ability. That is a very different evidence base than when you believe somebody who says, well, you did this and this and this and this and this. Yeah, you might have. You might have, but I don't know any human who spends majority of their day being an evil person. I just have not met one yet,
Mhm.
even the worst perpetrators.
Mhm. Hmm.
I use this with substance use also, because we have this idea that, recovery should go a certain way. So I say, okay, well, in the past 30 days, how many days did you use your substance? Like, let's be honest, write it all down. How many days did you not use your substance? Well, I drank more, I drank most of the days. Okay, I didn't ask that. How many days did you not use your substance? The
Mhm.
percentage typically is 90% or above that they're doing with, their statistics are a little louder and more fruitful than what their mind has been telling them, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So switching gears, it first of all requires that we understand that, okay, the Every religious text I've ever read says the outside world isn't where the safe part is. What is within, you are a part of something greater, whatever you believe that to be. And it's impossible that you are the cause of every problem in this world. Let's drill that down. It's impossible that you are the 100% cause of every problem in your life. How I know that is because problems arise in a relationship. It's either a relationship to my thoughts, a relationship to my partner, a relationship to my work, a relationship to the stressor, everything. What that means is that I have a part in it. I can't control it all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exciting. That's a really good place to start questioning if in fact we're if in fact we're pathological, because a lot of the rules that came out of the law system and a lot of the um, thoughts in our head that I would call bullying thoughts are from the lens from a lot of lenses. We live in a white supremacy based legal system that's 400 years old. We live in a healthcare system that also included eugenics, and we live in an economy that says to us, if you don't produce, then you're not as valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Contextually, we have really done well to learn those. I'm reading a book right now called Sedated. It's about the how capitalism impacted mental health, and it's gross. It's disgusting. We've got everybody on. I'm on psych meds, by the way, so I'm not like I'm a therapist. For 20, since the 80s, we decided that if you just take a pill, you'll be better. Most of the pills are ineffective without therapy. They are beneficial, but now we have these worksite places coming in and worksite wellness places coming in and saying, okay, well, it's not really about wanting you to be better. It's about making sure you get back to work and saving us money.
Mm-hmm.
So again, all of those things are outside forces. When we dig into who we are, how we became who we are, and who we want to be, we start going into the territory of personal empowerment and agency. And to the point of my little sign, anything is possible. Anything is possible when we start to change the equation of how the world has power over me versus how do I want to have power with the things in my life, my thoughts, my relationships, my work, what kind of human do I want to be? And if you've got an inner rebel like me, I'm very happy to say, oh, you think that of me? That's not true. Watch.
Oh, yes.
Just get out of my way. So you can use that as leverage and motivation. Like, yeah, I'm not going to allow you. You can say that about me, but it's not true. And I just like, if you believe your own story,
Mm-hmm.
it's a buffer against what others tell you about who you are.
I have a story about that. Do you want to hear it or not?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I was going through my whole rigmarole with CPS and family court at the same time, so the caseworker recommended to the judge to take my boys away, and that I don't know, I have it all in transcript, but she totally perjured herself on the stand. Anyway, I told my lawyer, I said, "Put me on the stand." So I went up there and the judge said, "Do you think everything she said is a complete fabrication?" And I said, "Everything she said is a complete fabrication." And he yelled, "You are appalling," on the stand. And I was gonna say, "Well, you wanted the truth, didn't you?"
Exactly. Exactly. Right. And innocently, these systems, narratives, problems, they're gone. They they innocently need us to fit into a mold. And the reality is humans are not in a mold. There's no two humans alike. You are allowed to have your own story. You're allowed now being not being heard is can cause us internal suffering. Not being with our children can cause us internal suffering. But like I believe on some episodes before, you can have a relationship with your child whether they're here or not.
Mhm,
Okay, that's not stopping you from having a relationship from your child. What it's stopping you from is having the relationship that your brain thought it should look like.
mhm.
If we can look at our shoulds, I will say to the end of my day, stop fucking shoulding on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Start shedding beliefs that don't fit this situation. Because again, it's so ingrained in us that how a family should look is X, Y, and Z. How a mother should look and behave is X, Y, and Z. How a mother and son should behave is X, Y, and Z. And then what we have is everybody's just performing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no authenticity. We're fitting into a mold because we were told for something that probably was useful 3 generations ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's part of our growth of self-compassion. Like, okay, yes, this doesn't look like my neighbor's family. This doesn't look like the family I grew up in. You know what? How am I supposed to know? Maybe it's not even supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're the one, and we don't have to analyze, but maybe you're the one who's going to trailblaze. And the thing that I think a lot of us really underestimate is that I'm really into intergenerational trauma. When you go back, it takes at least 6 generations for trauma to be solidified and or undone in somebody. 6 generations.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us don't even know what our families were doing 6 generations ago, but I guarantee you that we know some rules based on 6 generations ago that worked actually as a good thing for them, but we're living in a different time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're blaming ourselves because we don't fit into what, that type of should that we thought it should look like. Well, they were married for 50 years. They kept their kid. What's wrong with me? Well, what's wrong with you is we're in 2023 post-pandemic. Everybody's fucking stressed. And, parenthood is not looking how it looked 50, 60 years ago, nor do you have the ability and access to be the present parent because of the workplace demands. It's like horrific what we ask parents to do aside from all these legal battles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
and top of cell phones and all this
yes,
technology that everyone has to have this right away.
right. So notice what you're holding
Mm.
as a requirement, like a should, that really, and then just honestly ask yourself, does that even fit my life? Does it even fit my life? And if it's not, then let's clear some of that clutter. Do some writing. And it's not, this doesn't have to be enjoyable. It's not enjoyable to be away from your child. I understand that. So grieve about it.
Mhm.
Write about it. Go to
Mhm.
therapy. Create rituals alone or with your child.
Mhm.
Those are very meaningful ways to process and transition this energy inside that's stuck and painful and gunky. And I call that clearing the clutter.
Mhm.
Like, just let's clear, like, it's not that we need to get rid of it, it's that we need to sort of percolate it and let it move and let it get expressed. One of my really favorite techniques with a client is to buy, well, okay, can't use it anymore because eggs are so expensive, but a dozen eggs and write down an anger pain point on each egg. So, like, um, assholes in my life, or judge XYZ, whatever his name is, and the dozen eggs, and throw them at a tree,
Mhm.
because the symbolic way that you're expressing and expelling gives opportunity for new stuff to grow inside.
Mhm. Mhm.
You can also do a dartboard. You can also do a pool noodle and beat the tree to death. Like, that's a safe way to express. But here's what happens. Gabor Mate in The Myth of Normal, I'll come to that later. But in his book, The Myth of Normal, he makes no mistakes that repressed anger turns into chronic illness.
Mhm.
And women in particular, but men as well, we are dealing with a lot of repressed anger. And if we don't start ventilating that shit in a healthy way, not January 6th insurrection, not, whatever, but like in a more consistent, healthy, yeah, this doesn't feel good. It's like the body's calling you to vomit that out.
Mhm.
Then we will have chronic illnesses, so that whenever and if ever our lives do look all rosy and sunshine, we're not going to be able to enjoy them then because we're going to be so in pain.
Yes, yes. I have another story on that if you wanna hear it.
Yeah.
Um, when I was going through all this, I used to sew a lot back in my younger years when I was much more ambitious, but I thought, why not make these, dolls out of just muslin?
Ooh,
And then I would write the judge's name on the back, the attorney's name on the back, whoever, all right? And then, of course, when I didn't have the kids on the weekends or whatever, I would take them out in the garage with a hammer,
good,
and I would put them on, like a mat so I wouldn't break the concrete, and I would just pound them, and it released so much anger.
good,
In fact, my husband was out of town at the time, and he called me, and I said, "Can you hang on?" And I put the phone down, and I just continued to pound because I was in the he could hear me. But it
good,
released so much anger, I actually went back in the house, and I just felt like I had a breath of fresh air.
good, good, because that is actually honoring your feelings. It's
Mhm.
typically, especially with PTSD, we take them out on other people
Yes.
without understanding why like for me, I was yelling at the cashier a lot,
Mhm,
cashiers, and they don't deserve it. And I knew what was happening, but I couldn't reel it in.
mhm,
If you want a little bit more sense of control, do it in a controlled space way, dance, fight, whatever. But it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. If more children were allowed to express their anger, we wouldn't have school shootings as much.
mhm,
They are, I mean, if we feel helpless, they don't get a decision. They're treated like property until the age of 18. They don't have any decision making on how their life goes. It's up to the parents.
mhm,
Um, Okay, so first we've got to what was the first one? It was life is not fair.
mhm,
The second way to change your internal switch gears is to clear the clutter. The third way to switch gears is understand trauma. I will harp on this till the end of my day. I wish there was another word I could call it that didn't turn people off, but the fact remains is that we all have trauma and nobody wants to talk about it. I'm
mhm.
not very popular. However,
Yes, you
in
are.
everything it's in everything. It's woven into our cultural and historical landscape. We cannot understand our environment or ourselves until we understand trauma and the role it has played in developing where we're at now. Okay, so again, we live in a white supremacist culture. We have devalued people since we started this country. We have made a hierarchy of people. We always um, you're not valuable unless you have a production um, uh, value next to your name.
Mhm,
And if you don't fit in the mold, that's a really good reason we can criminalize you and make money off of you.
mhm.
Okay. So it's kind of gross how that works. But
Yes.
okay. So go ahead.
Oh, I just it just came to mind, I had another
Yeah.
story. But I had gone to the neurologist because I have long haul COVID,
Oh,
whatever.
God.
And so he had seen me before last year. I know he was running late and he just walked in the room without my chart. However, he had 3 residents standing there who I think knew what was going on and the nurse. And he said to me, he said, "So do you work? Do you have a job?" And he looked at me like that, like and I was just so shocked,
Wow.
I just stared at and I stupidly said, "No," but I should have said, "I'm a book author.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
did you read my chart?" Because he even said, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "Because you told me to come back in 1 year." Do you see what I mean? It's like
I
little
do. I
things.
do. It makes me livid. It makes me livid. By the way, if you think that anybody's immune for this, doctors now are, most of them are burnout and wanting to leave their field. But to your point, what that looks like is it trickles down into compassion fatigue, where, okay, bring in your fucking chart.
Yeah,
Okay. Can you just bother to like look at my history? You're the one getting $250 right now. Like,
yeah,
let's go. Like, why am I educating you? You have it in your chart.
yeah.
But second of all, the condescending and the implicit bias, and that happens every day in this country,
Mhm,
specifically if you're not white. Shit rolls downhill. But now where we're at is that even where we used to think doctors are immune from things, like the professionals, they're getting it too. So this is we're just not in a good place culturally. But again, that's the outside world. We can control our insides. If you learn how, which I teach in all of my courses and my classes, you can switch gears in your brain
Mhm.
to pause and decide how you want to respond to that. Because I probably, at one point in my PTSD, I might have just punched him in the face. But
Yeah,
that would have criminalized me, right?
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was so stupid, I just sat there dumbfounded, and then when I drove home, I called, and left a message for the nurse to let him know that I do I'm a book author,
Yeah.
um, even though they know I've had a heart attack and I I just
Yes, my fucking profession is a survivor.
right.
That's what I am. That's my job.
Uh-huh.
What else do you need to know? Like it just yes, and that's the kind of thing that really starts to frustrate us. And like, am I even in, am I invisible? Do I not exist? But this is why these switching the gear type tools can help you remind yourself you're not invisible. It's not you. Sigmund Freud, I think, and this could be a meme that's wrong. Don't decide you're crazy until you look at the environment you're surrounded by.
Right.
Like let's get really concrete here and decide who's the crazy one, because we are surrounded by crazy. We could be partly crazy, but we're also quite productive in our own lives, in our own ways, doing the best that we can with trauma usually in our background. So that's another barrier that we face. So yeah, I think overall we're for the most part doing pretty good on an individual level. Societal things, that's another topic, but
Mhm.
just to know, just to understand, like there is a difference between what it looks like I am and what I actually believe in myself that I am. And to the point of spirituality, the more connected you are with something greater, that's another buffer, that's another tool. It's a free reminder to you that no, I am part of something bigger. I didn't even create this world. It's actually, the world is pretty flawless when you zoom out and understand it through the way that I do. But that doesn't mean flawless, meaning it all makes sense, not that it's tolerable or joyful or anything we would want to happen.
Mhm.
That's I want to qualify that. That's a little different than saying everything happens for a reason. Like
Mhm.
I can see the common thread when things happen, but it's real messy to get through.
Yes.
For instance, I don't know about your experience. I had a suicidal ideation hospitalization in 2019 and I overdosed. I did not want to be here because I was in a no-win situation,
Mhm.
believing what I was being told about myself, that I was a criminal, that I was pathologized, that I didn't see any way out. I was a burden to everybody. I was causing everybody problems. And in that hospitalization, I did get the clear thunderbolt, undeniable awareness that only I could change how this goes. But I
Mhm.
better not entrust my safety to people who do not have my safety in mind.
Mhm.
And I've just been soaring ever since. Like it was messy. I had to spend a lot of money to get out of my legal issues.
Mhm.
And I don't ever want to do that again. I wouldn't have wished it on myself. But now that I know that,
Mhm.
it has catapulted me into a different frequency in my life because I know I have better boundaries. I communicate better. I'm not dealing with your bullshit. I know who I am. I'm not apologizing for who I am. And I don't know about anybody else on this podcast, but I've apologized since I came out of the womb
Same.
for being a burden.
Mhm.
And I just don't do that anymore. And as a result, I don't care what you fucking call me. You can
Right.
call me anything and then do what you need to do. But I my ducks are in a row. I'm
Mhm.
good. Now get out of my way and watch me.
Mhm.
We're not doing this. I don't like you're not going to steal my joy. You're certainly not going to kill me, and I'm not going to allow you to harm me any further. And I had to say no to further harm, and that doesn't always look like what we think it should. Saying no to further harm sometimes means you need to take a pause from a lawsuit,
Mhm.
or you need to let somebody else externally say the narrative about you for your own well-being and safety.
Mhm. Mhm.
Does that make, you know what I'm saying? Like, so there's no right or wrong way to go through a custody battle, But whatever you decide, you're the one that has to put your head on your pillow at the end of the night, and you're the one that has to deal with what it feels like on the inside with that decision.
Mhm.
And once I started listening to that, it's like an immunity.
Mhm.
Like, okay, yeah, well, and the other thing that occurred to me is that all of my heroes had been criminalized. So
Mhm.
why was I so afraid of this?
Mhm.
If they got through it and figured out how, surely I'm not that dense. Surely I can, there's something there that I could learn from.
Definitely.
Okay, so the world is not fair. Clear the clutter. Understand the trauma. Okay, so somatic. Let's talk about the somatics of trauma because this is something that people really struggle with dealing with. Soma just means like it's a little bit of energy outside of your body for the most basic description. But what the new research on trauma says is that if you do not deal with it, this again gets stuck in the body through generations. Like our parents have given it to us through DNA. If you had parents who escaped or immigrants or domestic violence, I'm 4 generations on both sides of mental health and substance use. So that's in my DNA. Not that it's going to cause me to have those things, but it is influencing the way in which I walk through the world.
Mhm.
Knowing that is half the battle. Knowing that there are actually very free, low cost exercises that you can do for yourself to move that energy out. It's called, somatics. Any trauma provider knows about these things. Gabor Mate's book talks about these things in The Myth of Normal. But really, it's more about noticing and honoring and processing.
Mhm.
When we come at it at that juncture, we don't have to carry it long term.
Mhm.
And it's not a one and done, but I'm not going to be afraid of you. We're going to be friends. And in our friendship, you're not going to need to be here as much.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
So that would be like avoiding certain family members if they're toxic.
So, okay, so this would be noticing how my body changes when I get a phone call from that family member,
Mhm.
noticing the heightened state of arousal, noticing what it's like to go into the judge and deciding if I can tolerate that or if I need to maybe do some visualizations with a therapist or set boundaries or communicate differently. Um, but noticing. Here's a simple one: when I'm binging, when we're binging on TV at night, it, am I hungry? Can I feel my body? Like, can I feel the food going down? Am I binging? What's this? I'm just getting curious. Am I binging because, is it related to the TV or am I really like starving and satiated? Noticing, those are high risk situations I'm thinking of. Noticing what makes my body relax. I won't get into attunement, but do you feel comfortable going to bed with your partner? Do you not? Do you avoid the bedroom? Do you not? Like what are the warning signs your body is putting out, but maybe we haven't been tending to?
Mhm.
And again, if you get into therapy, if you get into somatics, I do this in some of my courses, you can start to work with that in a way that, okay, yep, this is happening right now, but when I tend to it, it will cue me to pivot and either protect myself more or increase the window of tolerance of it, whatever. I mean, you get to decide. The point is noticing it so that you can decide.
Mhm.
And so just that's all I'll say on somatics. Somatics. It's a real it's a whole thing. So like I said, that's in Gabor Mate's The Myth of Normal, is an excellent book to talk about how the mind and body leave residue in our entire throughout our entire lifespan. But we're not, our mind says we're helpless. Our mind says we're hopeless. Our mind says we're powerless. It does that to protect us.
Mhm.
It's a very scary thing to have your values violated.
Mhm.
So naturally, it's going to avoid those situations where these are violated, which is why it's such an affront to our body when we hear, you're a criminal, and like suddenly you're in the twilight zone. Like, how did that? What are you talking about? That is so not my own worldview. So your mind will try to adapt, and it will be like, oh, okay, better follow the rules, better do, oh, what, got to check these boxes. What am I doing? And that's how anxiety gets created. That's how depression gets created, all of those things. But it's just important to check with yourself if you believe,
Mhm.
because our mind, again, the number one job of our mind is to protect us. It just works a little too well sometimes
Mhm.
based on things that have happened in the past, not the current situation. Because it's going, okay, something really scary happens, my body's cued to be, in fight, flight, or freeze or fawn. It is reacting based on the programming from the mind from some previous scary thing. That's all the mind is doing. Oh, fight, flight, freeze or fawn. Okay, if you don't know how to switch gears out of that, this will be as scary as the first time something happened.
Mhm.
The smart brain, the executive functioning, is the one that will figure out if this is scary or not. But it's not going to do that if you feel like a car is on your child,
Mhm.
right? That's not supposed to. I don't want my executive brain muddying the waters when I'm trying to run away from a dangerous lion. But playing with that space, like, okay, deep breath. By the way, if you breathe out longer than you breathe in, you're helping to ventilate, you're helping to stimulate your vagus nerve, all of this good stuff that can help you, turn the volume down inside. When you interrupt that, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, then your executive functioning can come online. The adult part of the brain, I call it. Well, is this a scary situation? What do I want to do about this? Should I make a list? Should I prioritize? Should I problem solve? Should I pull in supports? Blah, blah, blah. None of that's available when you're in the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Mhm. Because you can't think straight.
Right. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to survive. That's the job.
Mhm.
And so it's really interesting. Okay, so I don't want to belabor that. Find your tribe is number 4. So finding your tribe means, first of all, are you a supporter of yourself?
Mhm.
If you're not supportive of yourself in these situations where you're being pummeled by the outside world's story about you, you're probably going to have a hard time surviving. Again, there was a reason we became our own inner bully. There was a reason we had to step in line. There was a reason we started to cross T's and look like a certain way, because that was more amenable to surviving the outside world. This is not that chapter. This is not the chapter. If you're not your own best cheerleader,
Mhm.
we've got to do some therapy, because there's a whole field of therapy now that wants us to talk to ourselves in our heads, which I love, because the schizophrenics get a day off today. Like,
Yeah.
yes, typically we have an inner bully, for sure. That inner bully was made to keep us in line and to, again, to be successful based on rules from 20, 30, 80 years ago.
Mhm.
Okay. So it's there, but you better make sure there's more people at that table in your head. You better make, where's your inner cheerleader? Where is your kind, wise old grandmother or some authority figure that has unconditional positive regard for you? Where is just like the movie Inside Out, where are the different types of conversations in your head? Because if the inner bully is running the show, you better be at that table, and you better be at the head of that table. That is not the head of your brain.
Mhm.
That's a protective part that we need to start working with and saying, thank you for your input. Let me hear what grandma has to say.
Mhm.
Let me hear what my cheerleader had. If I was Oprah or whoever your hero is, what would X, Y, and Z say? What would Emma Goldman say about this situation? What would my mom, who I respect a lot, say about this situation? Why that's important is it's not just because I want us talking in our heads all the time. This is really practical, actually. We get certain tapes in loops and recordings stuck in our head. And so we'll always, well, you're not good enough. You're not enough. You didn't do hard enough. You didn't try hard enough. You should, blah, blah, blah. You know, all of these, but they're the same repetitive safety mechanisms that, again, were created for situations that were long ago over.
Mhm.
But because the brain is so good at protecting us, it says, oh, this might look like that. This might feel like that. Oh, this is that situation. Breathe.
Mhm.
We don't know that, but let's take a consensus. What would my biggest cheerleader say? And how it's more information to process from, but it also, again, it gets us unstuck from the rabbit hole of worry and anxiety and worst case, and I'm a worthless mother, blah, blah, blah. It's called internal family systems. You can find a therapist who's well versed in that. It's really exciting outcomes.
Mhm.
Okay, so then, so find your tribe. So how we talk to ourselves matters. And this is along that lines with the committee in your head.
Mhm.
If you are not kind to yourself, you're helping your perpetrator.
Mm. Mhm.
I that's not nice. That's not nice. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't want your child to experience that. I don't wish it on my worst enemy. In fact, I see a lot of behaviors that happen because we're mean to ourselves. And here's it's like it's like we have to prove that we deserve to be kind, deserve to be treated kindly and with compassion. No, that's the cultural programming that we've had. But being kind to yourself, nobody has to know. Nobody
Mhm.
has to know how you're talking to yourself in your head. But what happens is when you start to undo some of the rote programming, and when you open it up to different possibilities, like I have new mantras now than I did 5 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, it reshifts your balance and your body and your soma so that the outside world it doesn't have the overpowering status that it did. It's also not as threatening. It's still scary, but it's not as threatening. But you start gaining what's called agency and empowerment. So this is like being kind to ourselves is a way to offer ourselves some power, some resourcing, some juice. And it's practical. It's not Pollyanna. The research shows this over and over. In fact, there's a really good book called The Happiness Advantage. And then there's a book called The Big Potential written by the same people who say, no, we're not the punishment that's not effective in terms of behavior change. Positive, um, not I don't want to say toxic positive psychology, but even just doing gratitude every day gives your mind something else to filter in, and it starts to change the alchemy of it. And there's study that shows that this is effective over and over again. So you don't have to believe me. Don't do any of this if it's not comfortable for you. And if it doesn't speak to you, I'm just telling you this is what works in my practice with my clients, and evidence is showing that.
Mm.
Nature, another way to shift gears this year, please do yourself a kindness and explore nature. Nature and us are meant to have a relationship. When you neglect nature, we often neglect ourselves.
Mhm.
When we neglect ourselves, we often go in nature. But when you go into nature, you can use that as a spiritual practice. You can see, yes, some fields are clear cut, a fire clear cut a forest.
Mhm.
And then what happens? Something gets right back in there and regrows. It's it's flawless.
Mhm.
Yes, we just had a really horrific earthquake in Turkey, and 1 million people died in COVID.
Mhm.
Turkey is not nice as all of those deaths were, is going to rebuild.
Mhm.
Yes, we have a really shitty um, situation going on in our lives right now, maybe related to the courts. Guess what? Nature tells me nothing is permanent.
Mhm.
Nothing is permanent, even death. So that's another way that you can do it. And then if you really want to get excited and cue yourself to think about things, I have a clear notebook with no lines in it because I like to draw and map and all that stuff. But if you can look at the where do you want to be in 10 years from now?
Mhm.
Dream. This is not where I have to be. This is a daydream activity. This is a play activity for your brain to just get imaginative and creative. And it's also a practice in letting the bully, like telling the bully to have a seat. Like,
Mhm.
no, no, this is just play. We're just daydreaming right now. Where would I like to be in 10 years? And then I want you to back that up and do 5 years. So if I want to be here in 10 years, what's it going to take in 5 years? And then back that up to, okay, what's that going to take in the next year? Like, what are some active, doable things that I can do in the next year? I don't have to get to the goal of 10 years. It's not about getting to the goal of 10 years. It's about offering your brain some daydreaming, which was very helpful in childhood, by the way. And that's usually when we started our trauma. But this is just, maybe this is on the table too. Who knows? It doesn't matter, but it's a possibility now.
Mhm.
But once you let that marinate in your brain and you go back to it maybe in a year and see how do you still want those things? Is it how aligned is it? Um, it's really exciting because you can't we can't we can't do things that we don't know about. Okay, so let me if we have not factored in that it's possible, we're never going to do something,
Mhm.
right? If I can't see a way out of this lawsuit, my mind doesn't want to think about 5 years down the road because it's stuck in the lawsuit. Well, first of all,
Mhm.
give it a break. This is a playtime.
Mhm.
But what if I had none of these things in my life? What if I didn't have this, and this? Where would I want to be? Would I want to be on a beach? Would I want to have my children around me? What does that look like? But what that's also doing for your brain is it's giving you endorphins and feel good hormones as you do the activity.
Mhm.
So it's also just a free tool to give your mind, like to nurture and nourish and resource your mind.
Mhm.
Then your mind has it on the radar, not as a goal, but like, oh yeah, that is possible. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And oh, people do it. It's fun. Like it just starts to like crack the door open of like, we are not hopeless. There are things we have tools and are available to do.
Mhm.
Finally, um, okay, count your assets. What I mean by this is we are not going to get anywhere in this world if we don't take, like a company, if we don't take stock of what we've got already. Many of us take stock only of the bad things. Fair, trying to protect us. I understand that. However, if you look at your personal characteristics, there's some things online like uh, just pull up personal characteristics or pull up personal values and find a list and then pick yours. Um, they are actually assets. Okay.
Mhm.
I'll even give you an example. One of my best assets got me in trouble over and over and over again in my legal case, and it was me advocating for myself.
Same.
Because I was in a substance use, but they kept deciding that I was non-compliant, in denial, and just obstinate. I think that if they probably could have diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder. I don't fucking care. It wasn't the like it. You know, what happens in trauma is that you adapt to what the situation needs. And so you start to walk farther and farther away from your authentic self to meet what you think you need to meet to win and be safe. Back that train right up. What are your characteristics? What do you like? What are your values? Are you sure that those are your values? Make a list of 1 to 10, make them from 1 to 10, prioritize the values. And so that everything else then that happens in your life gets checked according to, does this fit into my value system or not? Is this a good use of my characteristics or not? So it
Mhm.
starts to align us. Um, Gratitude, count your assets, count the gratitude every day. That's an asset. The things you are grateful for, those are free assets that we take for granted and they actually can give us endorphins and rewire our brain to start seeing more positive things out there. Further research. Support. Who is your support system? That's an asset. Even if it's yourself. If you're not your own support, I highly recommend getting therapy so you can figure out how to do that. Because if you're not your own support, you are set up to fail.
You're right.
Knowledge. What's my knowledge? What are my knowledge, skills, and experiences in my life? Where am I an expert in my life? And you're going to say, if you're like me, you're going to say, an expert. I'm not an expert in anything. What the hell do I know? There's so many people that know more than me. I don't care. Guess what I'm an expert in? I'm an expert in 46 years coming out of the womb with intergenerational trauma. I'm now an expert in trauma and harm reduction. I have 4 degrees, 2 degrees, 6 certifications, 2 podcasts, and a book. If somebody would have told me that I would have dared to do that 5 years ago, before all this started happening, I would not even have believed it myself. But when you start to become your own best asset, you get to create a world for yourself and take up space in the world. And nobody has to give you permission. But when you're not so busy tap dancing to fit into somebody else's false mold of who you should be, there's so much room to play. It's liberating. So make sure that you know your own assets.
That is good advice. Yeah, I'm so glad we did this podcast.
Me too. Did I go too fast?
No, it's very positive. Whenever I finish one of your podcasts, it's like, I feel so much better about my day. I really
Well,
do.
and sometimes we're not going to feel good, and that's okay. There's a certain point where we need to grieve about things and be hurt, be fucking hurt. But again, we're not trained to do that, and it's okay to cry. But if you're crying and spending attention on those things, that's wonderful. Please honor that. And what are we doing on the other side of the scales to beef up our resourcing, our inner juice, our buffering? I call these all free buffers. Like you can arm yourself from the inside out, and you can be like Teflon against these. It takes work, it takes years, but you start now. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. These are small, doable things. Do what you can, do what speaks to you, but invest in yourself, because nobody is going to want that in the world. And if you ask me, it's the biggest form of rebellion possible.
Awesome. Now, where can people reach you if they have any questions?
Yeah. So I have an outpatient behavioral health practice that's full. I'm hiring. I have a coaching practice called Clouded Compass. I have a link tree, which I can send to you, but the link tree has the Clouded Compass coaching. I have 2 courses. Oh, the last course that I created was Mind Reset. I just want to talk a little bit. Okay. So the Mind Reset is how to reset your mind, how to eliminate self-limiting beliefs, how to have greater clarity and focus in your professional and personal life. Learn practical tools, education, and neuroscience from my 20 years experience working in behavioral health and learning what works to improve quality of life. So that is available also on the link tree. My podcast, I just interviewed From Junkie to Judge, a one woman's triumph over trauma and addiction. So this is a judge. I'm getting excited that territory. I interviewed Dee Dee Stout. She's also savvy in harm reduction. This month is African American History Month. So there's a book I cover from Resma Menakem about intergenerational trauma and why. This is the book that taught me how to forgive my parents for things they didn't know. I'm doing bell hooks today. I'm doing 2 more books this month. So I'm all over the place, but it's on my link tree.
I have the link tree Clouded Compass in the podcast notes from last time.
Oh, sweet.
So I can just copy and paste and put it on this one too.
Yeah, and if anybody wants this new course, I'll have it up and running in the next week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on and lifting us all up.
Thank you. I come
Thank you. Seriously.
I'm laughing because people I've had that come up a couple times. Like, it's like, you're just like the same sentiment. And I'm like, I'm talking about really difficult things here. Like how I don't want to sugarcoat it. I just want to make sure I'm not sugarcoating. It's not It's not about getting rid of the hard things. It's about renegotiating our relationship with the hard things and renegotiating the relationship with ourselves. But
Mhm.
I will be damned if I'm paying for a lawsuit and I'm going to believe your bullshit about me.
Mhm.
That's my decision. That's my choice. I have a right to decide who I am and how I go about this world. And I'm not doing your work for you. I have paid you enough.
Mhm. Mhm.
So you can go think what you want. I'm over here flying through the, like, just healing my PTSD, dealing with my weight, starting businesses. Just get out of my way.
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
need I don't need your negative stuff.
Right.
I am not here for permission anymore.
I think a lot of us should be saying that.
Yeah. I do too. And I think it's exciting when we do take ownership of our own lives in this very internal way because anything is possible.
Right.
It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. I love what I do. Thank you
Oh,
for having me.
and you're gonna come back on, you
I'd love it.
whenever you're ready. Okay. Don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I am your host, Mary Ann Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Laurie Smith in the future and other guests. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if your listeners want some topics discussed, let me know.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.